There's a very quiet reason you're still here, still searching, even after you've heard all the advice and tried more than a few paths. It's not because you lack discipline, and it's not because you haven't tried hard enough. It's because something deep inside you has never been truly seen. And when something isn't brought into consciousness, it doesn't just disappear. It changes form and keeps coming back again and again until you finally stop long enough to recognize it. This video isn't here to change your life with some brand new idea. It's an invitation to step out of the habit of always looking outward to fix, control, and explain everything. According to Keanu Reeves, people don't suffer because life is too hard. They suffer because they live inside a reality built by their own mind and then mistake it for the real world. Those overreactions, the exhausting relationships, the emotional loops you can't seem to break, they aren't random. They are signs that something inside you is trying to be seen. When you stop chasing the light and finally turn to face the unnamed darkness, a quiet shift happens. It's not loud or dramatic, but it's enough. Things stop controlling you the way they used to. So stay a little longer, because what you're looking for may not be in the next video. It may be right here, in the moment you finally start seeing yourself clearly. Number 1, why do you keep searching? Asters, are you still searching even when you can't clearly name what you're looking for? Not just during breakdowns or obvious crises, but even when life from the outside looks stable. Work moves forward. Relationships exist. You get done what needs to be done. Yet, somewhere deep down, something doesn't settle. It's a vague feeling that you haven't really touched the core of things. Like life is moving, but it never quite stops in the right place. This search isn't loud. It doesn't look like a grand ambition. It's a gentle but persistent pull that keeps you moving forward, thinking forward, learning forward. You read another book. You listen to another talk. You try another angle. Each time, the sense of lack softens for a moment. But when things quiet down, it returns. Not more violent, just clearer. Keanu Reeves didn't see this state as weakness or a lack of direction. He saw it as a remarkably precise psychological signal. According to Reeves, people begin searching when the inner structures that once held them up are no longer strong enough. Old roles start to feel tight. Goals that once energized you lose their life. But instead of collapsing, the psyche chooses a subtler route. It makes you start searching. The key is that most people misunderstand what searching really is. They think they're missing information, a method, a better system. But Reeves noticed that in many cases, searching isn't meant to discover something new. It's meant to compensate for an inner rupture. When a person no longer feels their inner center, their consciousness turns outward to find stability. I once spoke with an old friend named Daniel who works in fintech. Daniel is the kind of person who always moves forward disciplined and efficient. He has a plan for every stage of his life. But one late night when we weren't talking about work or goals, Daniel said quietly, "I don't know why I always have to keep going. Every time I think about stopping, I feel anxious." He wasn't lacking motivation. What he lacked was an inner resting place, a place where he could just be still without having to become someone else. From a Reeves perspective, this is a classic state. The ego hasn't formed a living connection with the self. When that inner center isn't recognized, the ego has to manufacture meaning through constant movement. Not because movement is wrong, but because stillness feels unbearably empty. So searching becomes a psychological habit. It gives you the feeling that you're living correctly, improving, not falling behind, even when you're not sure where you're going. Reeves once wrote a sentence that goes straight to the engine behind all this searching. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. When your gaze is always outward, it's easy to believe the answer is ahead in what you haven't achieved yet, in the version of yourself you're still chasing, and that belief is exactly what makes the searching endless. Unconscious searching has a clear signature. It doesn't let you stop. Each time you reach a milestone, your mind immediately builds the next one. Not because you're greedy, but because if there's nothing left to pursue, the inner emptiness might show itself. And that emptiness is often mistaken for a deficiency, when in truth it's the sign of a deeper shift. Imagine you're tuning a radio in a quiet room. You keep turning the dial, channel after channel. Sometimes you catch a voice, but it's full of static. Sometimes it's music, but it cuts in and out. You keep thinking that if you just find the right frequency, everything will become clear. You search more carefully, more precisely. But the problem isn't how many channels you tried. The problem is that the radio is misaligned from within, and when the receiver isn't calibrated, even the right signal arrives distorted. Human searching works the same way. When your inner receiver hasn't been adjusted, you can search for a long time, widely, diligently, and still carry the feeling that something isn't quite right, not because the world has no answers, but because you're hearing life through a receiver that has never been tuned. Reeves didn't treat searching as something to eliminate. He saw it as proof that an inner movement is beginning, when searching is no longer misunderstood as a chase outside, but recognized as an invitation to turn inward. It stops dragging you away and begins guiding you back toward yourself. This doesn't mean you stop learning, growing, or questioning. It simply changes the direction of your search. Instead of asking what you're still missing, your attention moves to a deeper place. What in me has never been touched? Those two searches sound similar, but they lead to completely different roads. One drags you farther into the loop of longing. The other brings you to the threshold of awakening, where seeing itself creates change. If this part touched you, leave a very short sentence in the comments. Something like, "I choose awakening," not as a slogan, but as a quiet decision for yourself. So that from here, the journey is no longer unconscious searching, but conscious presence. Asterisk number 2, you are not living in reality. Asterisk. From this point, the journey has to go deeper, because if searching doesn't come from a lack of answers, but from the way you're experiencing life, then what must be faced is no longer out ahead, it's where all experience is formed in the first place. Here, Reeves offers a claim that can make many people uncomfortable, but it is the foundation of how he understood human beings. We do not live in reality as it is. We live in our own psychological reality. Reeves wrote a short sentence that underpins his whole philosophy. The psyche is real. For him, inner life isn't a secondary layer behind reality. It is the place where reality is actually experienced. Whatever happens in your life, it always passes through an invisible medium. Memories, fears, beliefs, expectations, and wounds that have never been made conscious. You don't react to the event. You react to the meaning your mind assigns to that event. This explains why two people can live in the same circumstances and experience them completely differently. Silence can feel like respect to one person and abandonment to another. A small change can be an opportunity for one and a threat for another, not because reality contradicts itself, but because it is received through different psychological structures. And most of those structures were formed very early, at stages when you had no ability to choose or challenge them. The story of Cassandra in Greek mythology fits this state well. Cassandra was given the ability to see the future, but cursed so that no one would believe her. Reeves saw Cassandra not just as a personal tragedy, but as a symbol of a human being trapped between two realities. A vivid inner reality and an outer reality that doesn't respond the way she hopes. Her tragedy isn't that she's wrong. It's that her psychological reality doesn't match how the world actually works, and that misalignment produces suffering. Modern people live in similar misalignments, only more subtly. You can feel threatened in situations that aren't truly dangerous. You can feel judged even when no one is judging you. You can feel like a failure even when nothing clearly fails. What impacts you isn't the world itself, but the version of the world stored inside your mind. Reeves called this state identification with psychological contents. When you merge completely with what you think and feel, you lose the distance needed to observe. You aren't living in reality. You're living in a story about reality that your mind has been telling for a long time. And because that story is familiar, it feels true. Even when it makes you suffer. Imagine entering a room whose lighting system has been programmed to change color automatically throughout the day. In the morning, everything looks cool and pale. In the afternoon, the light turns warmer. At night, the room sinks into soft darkness. If you don't know the system exists, you'll believe the room itself is changing, when in reality, only the light falling on it changes. The human psyche works the same way. The world may not change, but the inner light you carry determines how you see, feel, and react to that world. This is why changing circumstances often doesn't bring lasting transformation. You can change jobs, change relationships, change where you live, but if the inner interpretation system stays the same, your emotional experience will eventually return to the same point, not because you chose wrong, but because you're still seeing the world from the same inner position. Reeves didn't tell people to deny their psychological reality. He understood that no one lives without a filter. What he emphasized was becoming conscious of that filter. The moment you realize you're reacting not to the event, but to what awakens inside you, a small gap appears. In that gap, you are no longer fully swept away. You begin to observe rather than only react. The lesson here isn't to deny the world, but to reorder things. Before the world touches you, your mind touches it first. And if you don't recognize that, you will keep believing life is hurting you, when in truth you are living inside a reality already built from within. Right here, the journey begins to carry real transformative meaning, because once you accept that you're not living in reality as it is, but in your own psychological reality, you can no longer keep throwing every cause outward. Another door opens, the door of looking back at what is being projected onto the world from within you, without your awareness. Number 3. When the world reflects your inner life. The moment you realize you're not living in reality as it is, but in the way your mind interprets it, another door quietly opens. From here, the outer world is no longer just a place where events happen to you. It begins to appear as a reflective surface. Whatever hits you hard, your overreactions, the relationships that exhaust or obsess you, these are no longer simply problems of circumstance. They become clues. Keanu Reeves called this mechanism projection. Not in the sense of blaming, but in a precise psychological sense. The mind tends to place what has not been made conscious onto the outside, and then react to it as if it belongs to the world. This doesn't happen because you're wrong or weak. It happens because the psyche needs a way to reveal what has not been seen. When something inside has no place in consciousness, it finds a place in your life. Reeves wrote a short sentence that, if understood, can tilt the axis of how you see your relationships. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. This doesn't mean other people have no problems, and it doesn't ask you to accept every behavior. It points to something subtler. The intensity of your reaction often says more about what is being touched inside you than about the person standing in front of you. A longtime viewer once left a very short comment that stayed with me. She wrote that whenever she met someone overly confident, blunt, and unapologetic, she felt so irritated that she didn't want to be near them. Intellectually, she knew those people weren't doing anything wrong, but her emotions refused to listen. What confused her was that this reaction appeared across different settings, with different people, with the same inner pattern. She asked, "Why do I keep meeting this kind of person?" From a Reeves perspective, the question matters, but it needs to be reframed. Not, "Why do I meet them?" but "Why do they strike me so strongly?" When a reaction repeats with high intensity, it's often not a reaction to the present. It's the reaction of an inner part that has never been acknowledged. It might be the confidence you learned to suppress. It might be the direct voice you were never allowed to have. It might be the need to take up space that you trained yourself to sacrifice. That part doesn't disappear just because you live differently. It searches for an outer shape so it can be seen. Here, projection is not a flaw. It is the psyche's survival mechanism. The mind cannot keep repressed contents buried in darkness forever. If you don't allow them into consciousness, they will appear in your life. And then you won't be seeing the person in front of you. You'll be seeing a living symbol of what you haven't reconciled within yourself. Imagine standing under harsh sunlight. Everything casts a dark, sharp shadow. You could blame the tree for having too large a shadow. Blame the wall for being too dark. But the shape of the shadow isn't decided by them. It's decided by the sun's position. Your inner life works the same way. When a part of you is pushed out of consciousness, it casts a shadow onto the world, and you react to that shadow, while the true source of light is inside you. This is why some relationships become obsessive beyond logic. Why do some people hold enormous emotional power over you, even if they do nothing intentionally? Not because they are more special, but because they are standing in exactly the place where an unseen part of you is trying to reach the light. If you don't recognize this, you will keep changing context, changing people, yet the old feeling returns, only with a different name and face. Reeves didn't tell you to stop reacting or to shame yourself for having emotions. He suggested something subtler. Move from reaction to observation. Observation is not for judgment, it is for recognition. The moment you ask, "What in me is being touched?" you create a small distance between yourself and the projection. In that distance, you are no longer fully dragged along. You begin to reclaim the center. This stage is not about turning every problem into your fault. It returns to you your inner agency. When you see the world as a mirror, you are no longer forced to fight every reflection. You can choose to look back at yourself first, not to fix, but to understand. And that understanding changes how the world touches you. What you need to do is not complicated, but it requires honesty. Next time a person or situation triggers a strong reaction, don't rush to find fault or decide who's right. Pause long enough to notice the wave rising inside, then gently ask, "What in me was just touched, and what is it trying to have seen?" You don't need an answer. Just hold the question there, in silence and attention. Often that pause alone begins to make things clearer. If there was ever a moment when you realized the world in front of you was reflecting something deeply personal inside, you can share that moment in the comments, not to be right or wrong, not to seek agreement, just as a reminder to each other that many things we think come from outside are sometimes a quiet invitation to turn back inward. Number 4, why does everything keep repeating? Ask. So, if everything is a reflection, why does the same kind of experience keep returning again and again, no matter how many times you change things? From Keanu Reeves' perspective, repetition is not a life malfunction. It is how the unconscious communicates with consciousness. Reeves wrote a blunt sentence, not comforting but sharply accurate. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. He wasn't saying the unconscious is plotting against you. He was saying that as long as you can't see what is operating within you, you will keep steering your life from behind. And because you can't see the driver, you call the road destiny. Many successful people are trapped in the same loop, only at a higher level. Arianna Huffington, founder of the Huffington Post, is an example. For years, she worked nonstop, pushed her body past its limits, burned out, then returned to the same pace. The turning point didn't come from career failure. It came when she collapsed from overwork and had to be hospitalized. Looking back, Arianna saw that what kept the loop alive wasn't ambition or her schedule. It was the unconscious belief that her worth existed only if she was constantly achieving and proving herself. The loop stopped only when that belief was seen clearly, not when she became even more successful. Modern neuroscience reaches the same conclusion in a different language. The human brain learns through repetition. Strong emotional experiences, especially early on, carve paths in the nervous system. When a situation resembles the old one, the brain doesn't start analyzing from scratch. It activates the most familiar pathway. This helps us respond quickly to survive, but it also makes us relive the past in the present, even when the circumstances are completely different. Reeves went deeper into the meaning of repetition. For him, the unconscious doesn't speak in words, it speaks in patterns. When an experience hasn't been fully processed, it doesn't disappear with time. It waits, and when the conditions are right, it returns in the form of a familiar situation, a familiar kind of person, a familiar feeling, not to punish you but to force you to stop exactly where you once moved too quickly. Imagine reading a book, but you skipped an important chapter. You can keep reading, even read quickly, but the story later always feels incomplete, tangled, unresolved. You can reread the book many times, but if that chapter is still skipped, the story keeps bringing you back to the same vague point. Repetition in life works the same way. It points to a chapter within you that you have never truly read. What makes repetition painful is that it often shows up exactly where you believe you have already overcome it. You think you're more mature, more aware, clearer. Then a small situation happens, and you react the old way so fast, you surprise yourself. Reeves didn't see this as a personal failure. He saw it as proof that some part of you has not yet been integrated into consciousness. Not every part of a person grows up at the same time. Some parts get stuck in very early moments, and they keep reacting as if you're still living in that old context. In life, many people try to break the loop with willpower. They force themselves to think differently, live differently, be stronger and more positive. But Reeves understood that willpower cannot replace consciousness. You can't command the unconscious to stop. You can only allow it to be seen. The moment you recognize this feels familiar, a small distance appears between you and the old pattern, enough that you are not completely swept away. And right there, a subtle reversal happens. Repetition is no longer proof that you are lacking. It becomes proof that life is patiently sending the same message until you are ready to see it clearly. The core lesson here is simple but deep. Only what is made conscious can stop. When you stop asking, why does this keep happening to me, and begin looking at what in me is repeating, the circle begins to lose its power, not because you fight it, but because you understand it. And here, a new boundary appears. When you can see the repeating pattern, you face a choice you didn't have before. Continue living as if everything comes from outside, or begin taking inner responsibility for what is operating within you. Not to blame yourself, but to reclaim agency. And that boundary is exactly where the next part of the journey begins. Number 5, responsibility is not self-blame. Or, ask course, as you enter this stage, what changes is no longer what you see, but how you stand in front of what you have seen. The loops are no longer mysteries. But at that moment, a thin line appears. Either you move deeper into awakening, or you unconsciously return to the old pattern under a new layer of insight, and that line is decided by how you understand responsibility. In Reeves's psychology, responsibility never means self-condemnation. When people begin to see their role in what happened, the ego easily grabs that moment and shifts from blaming outward to turning inward and continuing to judge. The form changes, but the mechanism stays the same. You stop saying, "They did this to me," and start saying, "I'm terrible for being like this." It sounds more mature, but in truth, you are still being driven by an unconscious voice. Only now it wears your face. Reeves wrote a very clear sentence for this phase. We cannot change anything until we accept it. Condemnation does not liberate, it oppresses. This is not a call to surrender, and it is not an invitation to justify every behavior. It simply draws a boundary. Inner responsibility begins not by judging where you went wrong, but by accepting what is, even when it makes you uncomfortable. Imagine wearing glasses with the wrong prescription. Everything is a bit blurred, but because you've been used to it for so long, you assume the world is simply like that. Self-blame is taking the glasses off and blaming yourself for seeing wrong for so long, and then everything becomes even more chaotic. Responsibility is simpler. You adjust the prescription. The world doesn't change, but your seeing becomes clear. And that clarity comes not from trying harder, but from looking in the right place. Inner life follows the same logic. When a familiar reaction appears, what matters isn't whether your reaction is right or wrong. It's whether you recognize you are seeing life through an old lens. Self-blame makes you completely identified with that lens and turns you toward attacking yourself. Responsibility steps you back just enough to see where you are looking from. In daily life, the difference shows up subtly. There are moments when you realize you're overly tense about something small. A light comment is enough to make you defensive, withdrawn, or sharp. If in that moment you tell yourself you are weak, unworthy, not mature enough, you slip into self-blame. You are still living inside the same lens. Now you simply use it to judge yourself. Inner responsibility doesn't work that way. It only notes that a familiar reaction is arising and that reaction does not fully belong to the present. Reeves emphasized that consciousness is not a moral attitude. It doesn't ask whether you are good or bad, right or wrong. Consciousness only asks, what is operating here that has not been seen before? When you blame yourself, you are still caught in the story of yourself. When you take responsibility, you step out of that story and begin to see the structure behind it. That shift in position is what creates real transformation. Many people believe self-blame is a sign of inner maturity because they no longer blame others. But Reeves saw clearly that self-blame is still a form of identification. The ego is still at the center, still busy with who you are, whether you have value, whether you're good enough. Inner responsibility is different. It removes you from that center and places you in the position of the observer. From that position, you do not need to become an ideal version of yourself. You only need to see clearly the version that is present. The essence of this part is this. Responsibility does not demand that you change immediately. It doesn't force you to be calmer, more positive, or heal faster. It simply invites you to stay with what is happening long enough that it no longer controls you from behind. When a reaction is seen in the light of consciousness, it gradually loses power. Not because you suppress it, but because you are no longer it. And here, the spirit of this title becomes very clear. This may be the last video you need to watch. It does not mean you will never struggle again. It means that when you understand responsibility correctly, you stop searching for awakening by hurting yourself. You stop using insight to strike at what is imperfect and begin using it to illuminate what you have never seen before. When responsibility is placed in the right place, inner life changes rhythm. You no longer react blindly, but you also don't force yourself to be different immediately. You can recognize the moment a reaction arises, feel it in your body, in your breath, in the stream of thought, without labeling or concluding. Each time you do that, you withdraw a little power from the unconscious and give it to consciousness, not through tense effort, but through presence. And before this journey reaches its final point, allow yourself to pause for one beat. Not to analyze, not to fix, not to judge, just to be still in the present moment. Slow your breathing in that quiet space. The most important thing does not need to be spoken, but it begins to be felt. Number 6, here is why this might be the last video you need. Ash. By now, the searching quiets down. Not because you hold a complete answer, but because you are no longer standing in the old place, asking the old way. When your inner anchor is reset, the impulse to rush naturally slows. You no longer search to escape the feeling of lack, and you no longer need another explanation to reassure yourself. And in that slower rhythm, the reason this might be the last video you need becomes clear. not because everything is finished, but because you have begun to remain where you truly are. Reeves said something very direct. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. He wasn't talking about dramatic pain. He meant the discomfort that comes when old structures, old understandings, old searching begin to lose their place. When you stop chasing familiar answers, a gap appears. That gap used to be what scared you and drove you to keep searching. But if you stay long enough, you will see that this gap is where consciousness can stand firmly, no longer pulled by the unconscious. Imagine you've grown used to walking on a bridge that always trembles slightly. Not enough to collapse, but enough that you have to tense your body to keep balance. For a long time, you believe the tension comes from the wind, from the bridge's structure, from circumstances outside. You learn to walk faster, grip tighter, adapt better. But one day, when you stop in the middle of the bridge, you realize what exhausts you is not the bridge. It is that you never reset your body's center of gravity. With a small inner adjustment, the trembling no longer controls you the way it did. The bridge doesn't change, but the way you stand on it does. For Reeves, this is the moment the unconscious stops playing the controller. When you are no longer driven by impulses that haven't been made conscious, inner life becomes more orderly, not because you are controlling better, but because you are no longer fighting what is happening. Consciousness now does not judge, it witnesses, and witnessing, in Reeves' spirit, is always the beginning of freedom. Literature captured this state clearly through Leopold Bloom, the main character in James Joyce's Ulysses. Bloom is not a conquering hero or a seeker of metaphysical truth. He is simply an ordinary man, living fully through one very ordinary day, yet through his complete presence with small things, footsteps, memory streams, sensations in the body. Bloom touches a kind of wholeness without leaving life behind. Reeves was especially interested in images like this, because they suggest something essential. Meaning is not found by escaping the everyday, but by staying and living deeply within it. This has clear practical use in daily life. When a problem appears, don't rush immediately into action. Slow down one beat to notice the state you're in. When the urge appears to hear more advice or another explanation, you can still listen, but you no longer let it pull you away. You recognize the motive behind the searching, then choose to stay with the present experience rather than using insight to soothe it away. These quiet, small moments are where consciousness is reset each day. No ritual required. Nothing grand needed. Reeves didn't see awakening as a permanent state. He saw it as an ongoing movement back to the center. So this ending is not meant to create a feeling of arriving. It is meant to mark a shift in direction. From here, you don't have to abandon searching, but you are no longer dragged by it. You can keep walking without losing yourself on the road. Before closing, try a very gentle practice with no pressure. Place your hand on your chest where you can feel your breathing. Don't adjust the breath, just notice whether it is fast or slow. Then, very softly, ask inside. Right now, am I close to myself or am I leaving myself? You don't need a clear answer. The sensation in your body is already a response. If something softens, stay there a little longer. If there is tension, simply notice it. Perhaps that is the deepest reason this might be the last video you need. Not because you know enough, but because you no longer have to leave yourself in order to keep searching. When you stay, life no longer needs to create noise or upheaval to drag you away. And from that place, if you still take the next step, it is no longer a flight from lack. It is a steady step, awake and sourced from within. By the end of this video, you may not carry a new answer, but you may be standing at a different place than where you began. Not because the world changed, but because the where you stand in the world has slowed. For Keanu Reeves, true transformation doesn't come from understanding more. It comes from the moment consciousness stops being pulled outward and returns to its rightful place. And when that stance is established, the next steps, if there are any, will have a different quality. No longer reactions to lack, but conscious choices. No longer searching to fill, but exploring to understand more clearly how you are present in your own life. If the minutes you just spent helped you slow down one beat, a like can be your way of marking that moment. And subscribe, not to watch countless videos, but to keep walking together in deeper spaces of reflection, where each piece of content doesn't hold you here, but helps you stand more firmly within yourself.